Good evening and welcome to our 7th lecture. 7 down, 22 to go, or 23. Tonight we will be talking about hoof form and hoof proportions. But before we start with that, I would like to answer a question that I often get asked, where can I find this, where can I find that? A lot of the things that we are talking about you can find in our newsletters, and on our homepage, which I have made a picture of here, you will find this under the newsletter tab. There you can access all the newsletters that we have published so far, and we have on the newsletter page that you see here, you can access the archive of 2008 and 2009 and the 3 issues that so far have come out in 2010. You also can sign up for the newsletter in the field up here if you haven't done so already. At the same time that you sign up, please also send me an email so that I can put you on my new list. I'm just working on a new newsletter list. I really appreciate this. There's also on the home page a link for the online course that's starting in September of 2010, actually on the 2nd of September. If you know anybody whom you would like to participate in this, please send them this way, and they can, I have now pay buttons up and they can enroll under this link. And if you feel that there should come more well-educated hoof care professionals into the horse world, then please consider sponsoring a student. You can do very small sponsorships. You can either say whom you want this money to go to, or you can just leave it up to me and I distribute it to the one whom I deem the most needy. There are quite a few people out there struggling to pay for the course, and it would help them to speed up the process a little bit. So coming to tonight's theme of hoof form and hoof proportions, we have been now through all the anatomy and hoof function. Now the form is still determined by the coffin bone, and you can learn to kind of see the coffin bone through the hoof capsule. You can see what's going on in the hoof by looking at the hoof capsule, and you will start to learn to visualize the skeleton inside the hoof capsule. And this is what we're going to try to work on tonight. We also want to talk a little bit about terminology so that we all talk the same terms. This is a picture that you have seen before, and in the anatomy lesson about the coffin bone, just a brief reminder, the front coffin bone in a healthy hoof has in general a 45-degree angle in the toe to the ground. The hind coffin bone in a healthy hoof has generally a 55-degree toe angle to the ground. When you see this in the real hoof, and these are feet from the same horse, then we have the same thing here. The toe line is actually 45 degrees here to the ground, and in this hoof it is 55 degrees. And that holds pretty much true. And this is going to be the paradigm to which we are going to trim. So when you look at the coffin bone from the top, we had established that the front is rounder and the hind is more spade-like. It is very difficult to make pictures from the top and show this, so I've made picked some pictures from the bottom, from the sole, and here on the left side you have a front hoof that is more round and a hind hoof on the right side that is more spade-like. And this has something to do with the fact that the horse pushes off with the hind foot and supports with the front foot. The hind foot has another curiosity, and that it is on the inside. This here is a left hind. On the medial side it is a little flatter than on the lateral side. A healthy hind foot is on the lateral side, a little bit more diverging in the wall, and the profile of the sole is a little rounder. The inside is a little bit steeper and the profile is a little flatter. The coffin bone of the front hoof is on the solar surface more shallow. On the hind hoof it is more vaulted. I try to picture this here on the same horse, front and back. When you look at concavity, and this is how the coffin bone is shaped, it's looked at from the apex of the frog to the hoof wall. That depth, it's hard to draw here with a two-dimensional picture, but that depth is concavity. That is determined by the concavity of the coffin bone. And in a front foot on the left side, this is usually between 1.5 and 2 centimeters. No, sorry, this is usually between 1 and 1.5 centimeters. In the hind hoof, this is usually between 1.5 and 2 centimeters. But these are just guidelines. Basically, it should be in the front foot less concavity than in the hind foot, or in the hind foot more concavity than in the front foot. So that we talk the same terminology, the red line in this picture is the hairline. And we will talk a lot about the hairline. The blue line is the toe length. The length of the toe from the top of the hairline to the ground. Toe length. The purple line is toe height, from the top of the hairline to the ground vertically. That is toe height. And this is a very important measurement. We also have heel height measured vertically from the hairline, at the end of the hairline, to the ground. Not measured along the heel, but measured vertically. When we look at the hoof from the front and want to talk about the wall length and height, the red line is wall height. The green line is wall length. The blue line is the hairline. Again, wall height, wall length. In the lateral picture we see here the heel. We have two red lines, and the red lines are the measurement lines for the heel height. The shoulder line is measuring from the hairline to the ground vertically, and is usually in a regular horse anywhere from 14.3 hands to 17 hands or something in that neighborhood. It is 3 centimeters. The larger red line, higher red line, is the measurement from where the lateral cartilage dips into the hoof capsule. The lateral cartilage makes in the back of the hoof a turn here. And where it makes that turn, we measure to the ground, and that measurement is usually, in an average horse, 3.5 centimeters. So it's half a centimeter more, which is not a whole lot, but it comes in handy to know this. Sometimes we need to use this measurement instead of the other. And certainly in a very small horse, like a miniature, these measurements are a little bit smaller, but not very significant. We go down to 2.5 centimeters maybe, and to 3 centimeters. In a draft horse or very, very large horse, this may go up to 4 centimeters or to 3.5 centimeters. So it's not much difference. The green line is the length of the heel, not the height, it's the length of the heel. So if you have a heel that is shaped like this, you see how this becomes all of a sudden very, very long. So this would be, if this would be a little bit lower and would be like this, then you would have a horse with a low heel that is very long. Here we have a fairly good looking hoof, just after the shoes were taken off. Hairline, 45-degree toe line, has a few problems, but regular horses do have always a few problems. Heel height is there, and just so you can see all this one more time without the marker zone. When we look at the hoof and we want to learn how to look at a hoof, when we look at a hoof from the front, we can take a hoof like this here and just make an imaginary line across here to see if this hoof is balanced from the front. However, this has often a few problems, that we're looking at a wall that is not quite high enough, and this has nothing to do with the toe necessarily. So when in our paradigm, when we are looking at the hoof, we are looking from the front just at the hairline in this region. We're looking if this is straight. And in this case it is pretty straight. Looks pretty good. Another way to look at the hoof is to look at the hoof from the side. And looking at what I have marked up here are the hoof tubules. Those tubules running from the top to the bottom, horn tubules. And you can see where it's not marked how they are running oblique to the ground. And if you remember our corium lecture, the lamellae corium in the quarters was also running oblique to the ground. So what you have here is matching hoof tubules. And when you learn to see these hoof tubules better and better, may that be in a light hoof or in a dark hoof, then you can evaluate what is happening in the hoof a little bit better. The same is true for the tubules in the front, and by the way, I just read this in the latest book about laminitis. The hoof wall has around 600 hoof tubules. Here they run perpendicular to the ground, and you can see where it's not marked how they are running, and by following them with your view up and down, you can determine what is going on inside the hoof. If these tubules run a little bit crooked to the side, then you know for sure that you have an unbalanced hoof. And then it becomes actually very difficult. So seeing those horn tubules is very important. We also look at the hairline, and not just at the angle that the hairline makes to the ground, but we look at how straight the hairline is. Is the hairline, this here is just a hair off the norm, and I would pronounce this to be a straight hairline. The little bit of bulge here and here really don't matter. This is nitpicking, and that kind of micromanaging gets us in trouble. This is a pretty good straight hairline in the hoof kingdom. We also look at the bulbs, and the bulb is actually this part here. I have magnified it here a little bit. This was one of the better pictures I had of a bulb that is plump and looks pretty good. You wanna know kind of how your bulb is shaped, how thick it is, because that determines how much digital cushion you have, and that determines some kind of hoof health. What is not so grand in this picture is the lateral cartilage here is pushed up a bit too much. This was a very sick pony, sick horse. So disregard this. This is not quite normal, but I don't want you to think that I try to sell this off as normal to you. We also look at the way the heel is running towards the ground, and this I think it's the best to be seen here. This is a slightly underslung heel, and we will later on talk a little bit more about what is an underslung heel and what is not. This would be a little bit better if it would be shaped like this. but this is just the marker to look at the heel. Is it running forward or is it standing upright? When we look at the hoof from the back, you have heel landing points, one here and one here. This is where the horse lands when he becomes weight-bearing. And look at the line from this weight-bearing point to the hairline. That gives you a pretty good indicator about the balance of your heels. If this heel is somewhere up here and this one is down here, then you have a much longer heel here than you have here. And you need to look at this and understand it, and that only when you see it can you work on it to rebalance that hoof. You cannot work on something that you don't know and that you don't see. It sounds pretty obvious, but I see this in trimming all the time. Also look at the hoof from the back when it is standing on the ground, and look how the heel bulbs are shaped, how they are coming in here, where the weight-bearing point is. Not so easy to see in this hoof. It's also taken a little bit too far from the side, so it's hard to take a hoof picture directly from behind, but I found one here where it's actually a little bit better. And you have here, you want to see where the hoof actually hits the ground with the heel on both sides. I put this picture in here to give you another visual of the concavity of a hoof. This is a naturally worn concavity. This pony always has this kind of concavity. The only thing I do once in a while is take the wall down, because otherwise he walks on stilts. He doesn't wear it off. Our ground isn't hard enough. But this is a nice concavity, and I think you can see this. This is, by the way, a front hoof, and it has easily 1.5 centimeters on concavity. And this is a young horse that never had shoes on, so with his feet everything is pretty much on the level. You also, when you have the foot up, you look at the sole and you look at the bars. This is an untrimmed hoof, and the bar runs here. This is where the bar goes, and on the other side it goes about here. And we have learned in anatomy that the lamellacorium ends about middle of the frog. So this is where about your bar should end when you trim it. It can be a little bit further forward because the bar grows out from the lamellacorium, so you have a little bit more leeway, like a centimeter forward or so. Just identify the bar every time you look at your horse's hoof so that you learn to see this. This is really important if you want to trim yourself. Here we have a trimmed hoof, and on the right side the bar does end in the middle of the frog. On the left side it runs a little bit more forward. And this is something when you make pictures of your horse's hoof, over time you look at the pictures again and again and again and you wonder why you did whatever you did. And as you do this more and more, you will develop an eye so that this is even. Little imbalances like that really from trim to trim don't make a difference. It does make a difference if this is always longer and this is always shorter. It will eventually influence the hoof capsule. But if it is just one time, don't crucify yourself. When you start making pictures of your horse's hoof, you will see things that you never would have seen. You see things on the computer that you would never have seen when you're hanging upside down over your horse's hoof. It is not enough to just look at the hoof. And I often get pictures sent of horses and people just send me the hoof picture up to here. And then I'm supposed to say something. And this is very difficult because you have to kind of evaluate the horse that stands on top of this. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this in a lecture about conformation. I just want to point a few things out here that this is before and after trimming, directly before and directly after, not 8 weeks later. This horse stands indicating some resistance to weigh the heel totally. He either has some heel pain or the heel is not balanced enough so he can't stand on it. In order to make up for the heel pain and to support himself, he also has the hind cannon bone pushed a little bit more forward in this direction. That way he can support his weight. Another thing that you see is that he has here a dip in the top line. And this dip comes directly from loading the toe, not loading the heel, having this cannon bone slanted backwards, and up in this direction is muscle tension. And when you have, after the trim, you see that the cannon bone is straighter, not perfect yet, but straighter, also straighter in the back. And that dip is a lot better here. So you want to see the whole horse in connection with the feet, not just the feet. Another important thing to cover is the difference between different breeds of horses. When you have a warm blood, like the one on the left side, you have a much more diverging hoof wall in general than with a pony on the right side. We divide horses in hard-hoofed horses and softer-hoofed horses. Warm bloods, draft horses, and the crosses usually belong to the softer hoofed horses, and these horses were bred over centuries to live on soft terrain or softer terrain, and their hoof walls are more diverging. Ponies, Andalusians, Arabians, quarter horses were all over time bred as hard-hoofed horses to live on hard terrain. And when they live on this hard terrain, their hoof walls are usually more upright. There is less connective horn tissue between the tubules, and therefore their hoof is more narrow altogether. It does not help to look at a hoof like this and have in mind a hoof like the one on the left side and now get devastated over this hoof form and try to trim this, and there is a trim technique that can help to widen the hoof, but more in the back than in the front. But don't get devastated that your horse has an upright hoof. Remember, there is an upright coffin bone in this hoof capsule. The hoof capsule just grows down on the coffin bone. It doesn't do anything else. It is impossible that you have in a hoof like the one on the left side here, that you have a small coffin bone, and it is impossible that in a hoof capsule like that you have a wide coffin bone that just comes to the edge here. This is not happening. They go hand in hand. When you take a horse from a horse like this is a Selle Français, French warm blood, about 16.3 hands. This is a Hackney cross, about 14 hands, if that much, somewhere around that neighborhood. When you take a horse, and we have actually done this with this horse, he moved from the South Carolina low country, which is all sand, to the upstate, and in the upstate it's all clay. And he moved in the summertime when it was really hot, and his hoof actually started to grow out here a little bit more narrow on the top, and over time became more narrow than what you see here. It's not a lot, and you have to have a picture that is just the same to see the difference. But you can see how it starts to narrow down here, and this is just to accommodate the new ground and the harder terrain, and the hoof tightens up a little bit more so that it doesn't destroy itself. And horses usually that move from soft ground to hard ground without any help of boots, they're a little ouchy in the beginning. They are not quite comfortable. They are a little bit more careful, but give it 4 weeks and they have adapted to the new terrain, and they can just do all the moves that they have done before now on the harder ground. I have pre-marked a few hoof capsules just to show you how they are different between different kind of horses. For that reason and many other reasons, at Equine Soundness we do not teach a certain trim. We teach various methods of trimming for different shapes and kinds of hoofs. Even when you have healthy hoofs, they come in different shapes and need to be accommodated accordingly. It gets even more complicated when you trim for pathologies. But this is what we do here. We teach how to deal with certain scenarios and not one blanket trim. Here you have a much more diverging hoof capsule, seen from the front. Different horse, different hoof, needs maybe a little bit of different trim. And the third one belongs to a quarter horse, fairly upright, and that does not mean it doesn't need to be a substantial hoof, but this is just a more upright hoof. And the walls are less diverging than in the last picture. And when you see them here side by side, you see what a difference there is in different hoofs, and that alone should tell you that you can't approach everything with the same trim. We have another thing that we need to look at, and that is the width of the frog. If you look at farrier textbooks, usually you see a frog that is shaped like this. Sorry. It is narrow in general, has the same cleft here in the middle, but it is very narrow. In a healthy hoof, and this is because farrier textbooks are derived from short horses, and most of them are contracted and don't have big hoof bulbs like you see here, and don't have a wide frog like this. This is a pretty good looking foot. So when you look at your horse's hoof from the sole, you want to draw a line through the collateral groove, and that line should come out outside the hoof bulb. If this is not the case, then you need to try something, and we talk about this when we talk about contraction. There will be plenty of time. You will have to do something about it to decontract this hoof. Here we have a little bit of different hoof form. It's a hind foot, but you still have a wide frog. It looks as if the line here is going through the bulb, but it is because that picture is taken a little bit too much from the side and not enough focusing on the middle of the hoof. It's a little bit of different form than the last foot, but still a very good hoof with a very good substantial frog. And then we have a different frog form, but as you can see, the requirements are still met. The green line comes outside the hoof bulb when you run it through the collateral groove. Something else I want to just mention on this, in my experience, if you trim the bar here a little bit more down than what it is shown here, just a little bit, you get much more circulation to the hoof, and within 4 weeks this hoof will look a little bit wider in this area here. That's just in my opinion. There is the bar a little bit too high, and when I trim this down just a hair, then the frog gets wider. And this hoof I just put up because I really like the cleanliness of the picture. Here you can see a little bit what is going on, and that's all this is about. This is not about, this is not how we trim. So what you have here, usually I would ask a student to show me what we have here, but since there are so many, I have to take this over. We have a little bit of bent hairline, and I have a suspicion that the trimmer put this immensely long scoop in here into the hoof wall in order to counteract this. I don't think this was such a fantastic idea, because the hoof tubules here are running already pretty much forward. Even so, here on top they're coming in a little straighter. So you see, with trimming you can change something. You also have here a heel that is pretty long, but not so very high. And overall, you don't have quite enough toe height. But this is just, how do you look at your hoof now after we have talked about all these different possibilities of looking at a hoof? In a white hoof it's a little bit more difficult, but here we have a hairline that starts to rise and then flattens out, usually indicating that the coffin bone is not quite where we like it to be. We have a heel that is slightly underrun, and it is not a whole lot, because if you take this line here and extend it to eternity, and this line and extend it, then you see how it, if it gets a little straighter, how it starts to meet eventually. In a healthy hoof, you want this line to be diverging from this one. So that heel needs to stand up a little bit more. But again, we will talk about this in the future. You can see here a little bit the hoof tubules, how they run. And you see an old injury that was either a kick or meeting with some hard object, or it is an old abscess that will grow down the hoof wall. Whatever you have like this will not disappear, no matter what you do to this hoof. It will just grow down the hoof wall till it is gone. You can't change the horn that you already have. You can only change the horn that is growing new out of the coronary band. This is a hindfoot of the same Selle Française French warm blood that we saw the diverging hoof wall in the beginning. Here is a little underslung, has a tiny little bit of rise here in the middle in the hairline, but in general fairly sound horse. I think his jumping ability to forefoot is limited by his owner's wishes to jump higher. If he would, then if she would want to jump higher, he certainly could. And here we have three different types of hoofs. The front one being fairly unhealthy, with a dipping hairline in the front and not enough toe height. This is a quarter horse. Then the middle is a Haflinger with a fairly good-looking hoof altogether. And this is also a fairly healthy hoof. That the toe is too long, this belongs to an Arabian. That the toe is too long is a trimmer's mistake and not a conformation mistake. This could easily just be shortened a little bit more, and then that hoof would look not so much out of proportion. I first set up this slide to show you just these two top pictures. And then I thought they will never believe me if I don't put the horses beneath it. This on the left is a mini hoof, and this on the right is a draft cross hoof. And if you don't see the horse on top, if you just see the picture, you can't tell what this is. This could be a saddlebred, this could be some kind of pony badly trimmed, whatever. The point that I try to make here is do not just judge the hoof, but see what's standing on top of it. Now let's come to something that is very close to my heart, and that is how to evaluate breakover, how to measure breakover, how to deal with measurements in a hoof. We have seen this hoof before, and it is fairly correct. What we want to talk here about is we're talking in our trim paradigm, we talk a lot about a hairline that is at 30 degrees. And I agree with all of you trimmers who are in this course, not all hairlines are 30 degrees. Seldom you have one over 30 degrees. I have at the moment quite a few, interestingly enough, but mostly you have hairlines that are more shallow than 30 degrees, that are just running more shallow. And I learned that the 30-degree hairline is the most important thing in the hoof. That was my schooling, but I don't want to view this anymore like this, because we learned to trim to the 30-degree hairline. If we didn't have 30 degrees, we chopped off more heel. And that is absolutely not correct, because then this horse gets sore. As it gets sore, it won't weigh the heel. Then it puts more pressure on the toe, and the toe gets even shorter, and the heel grows faster. This is how one can founder horses. If you have a shallow hairline, all you need to do is measure that hairline, pile down a 105, this is a front foot, a 105-degree angle to determine where the breakover has to be. This is viewing the foot from the side. This is where you can view it and say, this hoof, if it was going following the toe line, and this hoof would be still out here, you see how much longer this would be? So then you have a really long toe. And what happens with this long toe in relation to the hairline is it gets levered away from the coffin bone every time the horse makes a step. And it's one of those micro tear situations where the toe is just simply too long and gets constantly pushed away from the skeleton. So when you take a 30-degree hairline and a 45-degree toe line and a 105-degree angle, then you have 180 degrees. This is how we arrive at this. And we want to always preserve the 3 centimeter or thereabout toe height. Heel height. So this is the hind foot. And here we have the same lines, the 3 centimeter heel height, then the 30-degree hairline, and because the coffin bone in the hind is 55 degrees instead of 45 degrees, we are aiming on the hind foot for a 95 degree to the breakover. 55 plus 95 plus 30 makes 180. And I didn't measure this when I trimmed this. If you look at this often enough and take a few pictures, put them on your computer screen, take your protractor. This here would be a 0 point for the protractor, and then measure down and see if you have the correct breakover for this hoof. Then you will over time develop an eye for it. And this is really helpful if you want to bring underslung heels back, because what happens here, you see how these hoof tubules are running forward? And they are running by no means parallel to the toe line. So what happens when you back this up to this breakover is you're starting to train the hoof tubules to come more upright. And with the hoof tubules coming more upright, the heel will come more upright. And then you have a good upright heel that can take a lot of pounding. And that's what we're really looking for. A healthy hoof that can move many miles over any terrain, at any speed, at maximum extension. Having talked about the hairline so much, I have to come back to what I learned. I learned that when you have a 30-degree hairline, you have a ground parallel coffin bone. And while this is in most cases correct, it is not always correct. I had 34-degree hairlines and totally rotated coffin bones. So the only time you really absolutely can be sure that you have a ground parallel coffin bone is when you take a correctly taken radiograph. And again, there are restrictions on that too. I see more bad radiographs than good ones. But in general, if you have a 30-degree hairline with a 3-centimeter heel, you can assume in general that you have a ground parallel coffin bone. I'm just saying it doesn't hold always true, so don't say this so kind of with conviction. Always be careful. But when you have this 30-degree hairline all around the hoof, even so we work here in a two-dimensional medium, but when you have the 30-degree hairline on both sides and a level hairline along the toe, then upon weight bearing, the weight comes absolutely even onto the hairline. And when upon weight bearing the weight comes even onto the hairline, all the tubules in the horn are stressed evenly. And when they are stressed evenly, they abrade evenly or they grow evenly. And this is really the big reason for me to have a 30-degree hairline. So that if you would move this horse that has a hoof that is conformed like this, if you would move this horse enough, you would actually, over varied terrain, you would actually not have to trim, because the hoof would abrade evenly all around. So, and then there is another thing, and about those, that 30-degree hairline, and I said in the two lectures that I gave today already that I have it somewhere in the newsletter, and meanwhile between the last lecture and now I looked it up and I have something similar there, but not what I'm going to show you now. So what I will do is I also published this in the Horse's Hoof, and I will send you that page of that article via email. If not today, I will do it tomorrow. So in the horse's body, in every body, in the human's body as well, run, according to Chinese medicine, meridians. Meridians are energy channels, and every meridian has an end point or a ting point. And in the horse, those end or ting points are sitting above the coronet band. Not on the coronet band, but just a hair a little bit above it. And if you really, really carefully feel around here, you can actually feel the slightest indentation of these points where the end points are. In the human, these ting points just below the bed of the fingernail. So we have different meridian endpoints on top of the coronet band. And only when you have a 30-degree hairline are these ting points stimulated correctly. If you have any problems in the horse, it is always paired with a blocked meridian. And where you have blockage, you have pain. And to remove this blockage can help significantly to restore your horse's well-being. If you think of it, if you had a hairline that is shaped like this, a very shallow hoof, then that ting point would be here, and there would be a lot of pressure coming down here, whereas this ting point would be in relation to this one more up and would receive less pressure. And as these meridians are connected to all the major organs, these organs are directly influenced by this. So not observing and striving for a 30-degree hairline has much more impact than just a imperfect hoof form. It influences the entire body. So let's look real quick at these points. It's important to note there is a medial side and a lateral side on this front hoof. And on the very top, on the front, you have triple heater 1. And stimulating this, may this be by an acupuncturist through a needle or by a horse owner with a red light or thumb pressure or index finger pressure. The needle is just a little bit longer lasting, but the others work as well. This point, stimulating this point, takes care of laminitis, side bone, ring bone, hoof injury, inflammation of bulbs of heel and coronary band, colic, throat problems, convulsions, and fever. Now, if your horse runs a fever, has a colic or convulsions, please do not just stimulate triple heater 1 and forget over this to call the veterinarian. This is only something that can help, but always in case of doubt, if you're not totally sure that this is all it needs, please call the veterinarian. LI1 stands for liver 1, LU stands for lung, and these are just the points that describe the meridians. We have a lung meridian, we have a liver meridian, we have a triple heater meridian, we have a small intestine meridian, and a heart meridian, and a pericardium meridian. There are more than that, but these are the ones that end on the hoof. This is the front hoof, and this is the hind hoof with totally different points. But you see when you look here, laminitis, 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 laminitis. So every one except kidney 1, every one of those 5 points helps with laminitis. Bladder, gallbladder, stomach, liver, spleen. And this is kidney. And therefore, I'm such a stickler for the 30-degree hairline so that these points get all stimulated correctly, and it makes a big difference in the horse, in his vitality, in his immune system. These things are all really important. And this concludes the lecture for today. I know it was a lot of stuff. As I said, I will try to send you this. I have to find it first. Via email, so you have a little bit of reference. And we are going to open now for the question and answer session. If you please would raise your hand.